Rcast. Welcome to the Climate and Coordination Rcast, where every week we'll be discussing topics related to all things climate change and OnChain's role in the solution. We will be discussing technologies that can adapt and coordinate massive amounts of data like never before, forming social architectures that grow collective intelligence, sharing and evaluating data planetarily, all while maintaining personal privacy and personal data ownership. A new decentralized economy is forming as we move from the third industrial revolution, digitization, to the fourth, decarbonization. By building a co-op, built on a correct by construction, concurrent, scalable solution, OnChain is structured to build out the new technology that will be required for a flourishing regenerative planet. Please join us on this journey.
Okay, great. Well, welcome to the Climate and Coordination Rcast, everyone. So, I'm very excited to share these headlines with you, and I'm sure we'll get into some other very interesting discussions after that. So, this first one comes from Scientific American. Putting this in the chat now. This is a very important story that I hope the world knows about, and I don't think it's really being talked about that much, but Scientific American is one of my favorite publications, and I actually learned recently, I believe it's the oldest continuously running magazine in America. I'm not sure if anybody knew that, but I certainly did not know that, and I find that to be really, really wonderful. Anyway, here's the headline. Mauritians launch rescue to save wildlife from the oil spill. This is from August 21st. This is from last week, but this is still ongoing today. So Mauritius, for those people who don't know, is a little island just east of Madagascar, which is east of the continent of Africa. It's sort of thought of as a pristine sort of vacationing destination. And unfortunately, there's been a huge oil spill there. There was a Japanese-owned ship that unfortunately ran aground and obviously damaged a bunch of coral reefs. But that was not really the big problem. The big problem was that it sat there for a while and it basically broke in half or something. Like it basically started to break apart. And so it's been leaking tons of oil over the last few weeks. And this story really goes into the rescue effort of plants and animals and the cleaning up of the oil, which is being largely done by local volunteers. It says, within hours of the leak, more than 5,000 local volunteers and dozens of career conservationists jumped into action to save their remote nation's vibrant, unique wildlife by controlling the oil and moving some species out of harm's way. And I just love this article because it does a really great job of explaining what these people were doing, why they needed to move certain plants and animals, how they did that. And I think it's just obviously, first off, it's a really sad story because hopefully we'll move into a place that will never have another oil spill ever again. Hopefully, that would be great to leave oil spills in the dustbin of history. But I think it's also a really amazing story about a community of people really banding together to get their hands literally dirty and to start getting this oil out of the water. And I wish that everyone had the same spirit. Obviously, when it's happening in your backyard, you kind of might have a different spirit. But I think it really just shows the direction of humanity, really just getting in there and working together, trying to make the best out of this terrible situation, which is really what's required during the climate crisis, I think, and any environmental disaster. It's not going to be enough to just speak up about it. At some point, we're going to have to actually help, whether that's, relocating animals to better places, or, fighting fires ourselves, or, cleaning up oil, or just picking up trash. There are lots of climate activists on Twitter that go out to pick up trash every day, and they make a video about it, and they go home, and that's it. And that's what they do every day. And there's beach cleanups near where I live in California. I love doing beach cleanups. But anyway, I just thought this was a really inspiring story about how these people are just working so hard to save their beautiful, pristine coral reef, environment. And this is a really, traumatic story. And I think I'm just really hoping that we get into an era that we don't have to have these awful oil spills ever again. So that's my that's the first piece of the day. Has anybody heard about this oil spill at all?
Yeah, I heard about the spill. Didn't the ship like bust in half or something like that? And
Something like that. Yes, something like that.
but I didn't hear about the positive response. But I guess it makes sense. Like, isn't Mauritius one of those special spots on the planet where there's all sorts of crazy, unique wildlife?
Yes, yes, they have a bunch, and this article talks about that. They have a bunch of plants and animal species that are native to Mauritius, and you really can't find them anywhere else in the world because Mauritius is already so incredibly remote. I mean, if you look at a world map and type in Mauritius, it's like literally in the middle of the ocean. So, yeah, that's exactly right.
So I'm going to guess that the people that live there probably have a higher perception and a higher kind of care for the environment that they live in. So it makes sense to me that there'd be kind of a really positive response of volunteers getting out there to clean things up. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it just made me really happy to see how much they care, and they're trying really hard. And I mean, the same could probably be said for Hawaii, for citizens of Hawaii, but we know that the land there, the sacred land, is now being, developed, and that is really bothering a lot of people in Hawaii. In fact, Mark Zuckerberg had a big problem there recently. I'm sure that either you already know about this or you don't want to know about it. But
Yeah, just stop talking. I don't want to hear.
Perfect. That's what I predicted.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
But yeah, he's purchased an enormous amount of land and sort of forcing people to sell it because he's paying so much, and that kind of thing. And it's really, really difficult for them there, for a lot of native Hawaiian people who believe that if you say no to selling your land, the person shouldn't just be able to offer so much money that they can't say no, that should not, be happening. But there is one more story, and this is from Forbes. And I actually just saw this last night because I changed my mind about one of the other stories that I had thought I was going to talk about. And Greg, when I saw this, I thought of you because we've been talking about this now for years. 4 years. So this is very interesting. This is from August 25th, so just a couple days ago. This headline from Forbes says over 500,000 Americans had to evacuate this week. Climate change might be to blame. Of course, the headline is a little soft for me. I wish it said something more like climate emergency causes over 500,000 people to, evacuate. But look, at least they're mentioning it in the headline. Obviously, it's very much to blame. The reason I said I wanted to bring up this story is because we've been talking about climate refugees and how there's going to be a huge climate refugee crisis in the future, and where all those people are going to go, and how we're going to move our cities inland, and just from drought and arid land that you cannot you can't farm on anymore, and and from heat and just all these different problems. But anyway, this is a really fascinating article. I haven't really seen an article recently that talks about the numbers of people that have had to evacuate due to climate emergencies in America in a really long time. Usually these types of articles that I've looked at over the past several years, well, actually for a lot longer than that, because I studied some of this stuff in college too, and that was about 5 years ago. But anyway, usually they focus on other nations or the world, but this one is unique because it's focusing on climate-related evacuations in America, which I think needs a lot more attention because people don't realize how big these evacuations are. This is now over 500,000 people, and it says here over 385,000 Texans and 200,000 Louisiana residents are under mandatory evacuation orders ahead of the, it says here, the Hurricane Laura, which just turned into a Category 4 storm, which is terrible. And then also in California, over 100,000 people had to evacuate, and now we have over 500 separate wildfires in California. And I think last year we peaked at over 600. Of course, the number of fires doesn't really matter so much as the acres burning, but it looks like we're having a worse season than last year, which is no surprise because that's what happens. So I just thought this was a really interesting story because for anybody who's interested in evacuations or, you know, just the escalating number of people every year that have to move or have to be temporarily relocated because of climate disasters is really increasing. And Greg has always talked about this as being a really difficult coordination issue. And I don't think this is being talked about really. Nobody on the news is saying 500,000 people in America have had to evacuate. People are just saying, oh, looks like Laura's going to be a bad storm. And they're not really connecting the dots here. This article also talks about the 5 costliest natural disasters in U.S. history and how they have all occurred within the past 15 years. There's a lot of really great sources in here. This list includes Katrina, Sandy, Harvey, Maria, and Irma. Katrina being the earliest one in 2005, but all of the other ones occurring then since. And there's some, there are maps here that describe the path of the storm, and then there's some other articles that are linked here about just where we're at as a nation. And I think it's really important that Americans focus on this because in America, I think there's an idea that we're kind of, I don't know, somehow insulated from the worst of the climate crisis, or I'm not sure why we feel that way, but we have horrible flooding in Iowa last year that, destroyed a bunch of farms, and it got to be 130 degrees, I believe, in Death Valley. And, America is facing the climate crisis. And I think the more that we make that known, maybe hopefully the better equipped we are to adapt and coordinate, but also hopefully we can start dealing with it policy-wise in a more aggressive way. So.
Yeah, I hadn't seen a perspective about just the number of people displaced from events over the last week or two. But yeah, that's a pretty huge number. Yeah, I mean, it's fortunate that Laura turns out hasn't been as damaging as people were warning. It was a Hurricane 4, but as soon as it hit landfall, it was reduced to a Hurricane Level 2. There's still a lot of damage that's done. I was watching some news reports this morning about all the power lines that have gone out, but fortunately there hasn't been mass deaths. So that's good. But yeah, it's just like, to me, it's just like I'm from the research that I've done, and I've done a fair amount of research. I think like a good source for climate research is skepticalscience.com. You know about that one? I think it
I'm not familiar with that one, but I will look it up.
Yeah, it's good. It does a lot of, it's just a lot of scientific backup to the skeptics. So, if you get, any kind of, uh, counter argument, you can go there and you probably find some good scientific backup. Another good one on YouTube is Potholer 54. Similar.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just noticed at the end of this article, there's a character named Joe Bastardi.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's pronounced Bastardi. Joe Bastardi, a meteorologist best known for working over 30 years at AccuWeather,
Mm-hmm.
outspoken critic of the idea. So the article ends off with like the counter argument that this is all just outside of the realm of the increased carbon on our planet.
Uh-huh.
Well, I was hoping to
Mhm.
put in a few words about this article. I think it's a really interesting one and an
Yes,
interesting
please.
perspective. First, I just want to connect it back to OnChain. This week on Wednesday, I demonstrated and it really was in real time while Daryl was was presenting the community week in review. I cobbled together a page, a Dappy page on OnChain that had both a picture of myself and a QR code of my governance rev address. So the governance rev address is the rev address that the co-op requires that its members submit in order to participate in voting, starting from 2020 onward. And so now that resource is OnChain. That page that has both a picture of me and other important, our identifying facts about myself, including my rev address. That's the beginning of an on-chain identity notion, so that which could be used for refugees, so that they can overcome all the issues of, not having a jurisdictional-based identity. Right? They leave one jurisdiction, and maybe their driver's license in a new jurisdiction isn't recognized, or they lose access to their identifying documents, which happens quite frequently, or they lose credentials and other things. And an on-chain basis for identity helps with that. Of course, it also helps the billions of people who are unbanked and don't have a notion of, a bankable notion of identity to begin with. So these are things that you can now do with OnChain, and you can do it in minutes. Each individual can do it in minutes.
So does that mean, hello, Greg and everybody, I'm not dead, I am here. Just in case you were wondering.
Good to hear. We have been wondering.
So
Hallelujah.
Notorious SRT in the house.
Yeah, I drove down to Brighton today to go and I've got to do some DIY around the house whilst I have time to do it. And I was going to get a kitchen tap. So that's what I was going to do. And as I was driving down the main highway into Brighton, and I've posted 3 links into the chat, I came across a sign right across the road. The planet is burning. And then another bridge, a little while after, another one. Big Extinction Rebellion banner. So, when we look at what's going on in the world and feel a little bit, disgruntled and ashamed and disappointed and sad and all that, there are these people, Extinction Rebellion people, that are out there protesting continuously. They won't give up. They're like the Terminator. They will not give up. Thank God. And so I thought, well, why don't I just have a Google around and find out if there's an Extinction Rebellion chapter, as it were, in Seattle and in LA. And I found them. The LA one was really interesting because included in a number of events that they are holding. You are in LA, aren't you, Nora?
Oh, yes.
Good, because that's why I went to LA. I thought, well, what's there for Nora? I haven't done you yet, Daryl, but you probably know what's there. So there's a very small thing, but edible gardens for LA families. So if you have edible gardens for LA families, you'll actually cut down the amount of plastic waste and increase the nutritional value of the food that people are eating.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And possibly save the soil. And then I had a look at the one for, just as you were speaking, Greg, I had a look at the one for Seattle. And the bit that really hit me in the face was, and your notion now of having your identity, your digital asset of identity on chain, is the start, potentially, of fulfilling the third purpose of the Seattle chapter, which is to fight for a national citizens' assembly, to oversee the changes as part of creating a democracy fit for purpose, quote unquote. And that's the Seattle chapter.
Well, that's awesome. There we go. I think a lot of people are recognizing what needs to be done. And this goes back to Nora's other point, which is we ultimately have to get our hands dirty. I was talking with a scientist and activist, I think it was on Wednesday, who hopefully will be joining our call in the not too distant future. And she was quite interested in bringing and frameworks for bringing scientists together who get their hands done, and making this distinction between solutions that are about direct action, such as edible gardens, where you have direct action that helps with the situation, and then these sort of 1 degree removes kinds of solutions, which is what OnChain is currently about, right? Which is the coordination problem. A lot of these direct actions are going to require coordination, and that's what OnChain is there for, is to help with that coordination. And the two are very closely connected, right? So if you want to assemble with an online presence, you're going to need something like OnChain. And that's why it's there, is to help with that. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought a unifying theme there, Steve, and I'm just super excited, right? Because it's the thing that I demonstrated. I think it's one of these things that people, somehow I'm just not very effective at communicating all the implications. But it's also very reminiscent of early MySpace, right? It's like, here I have the beginnings of a social network, but it's on chain.
Well, so here's a thought for you then. So in the UK, as you know, we've had quite a major lockdown, and even now, in these last days of August, and I went to my local railway station to drop my son-in-law off, and the railway station, the car park was pretty empty. I mean, normally you couldn't get in that car park. So people are working from home, and a government minister, the Minister for Transport, I believe, or it might be the Minister for Business, a guy called Grant Shapps. He's not a particularly favoured person by me, but he said, it's time for everyone to get back into the offices. And most people who don't need to go into an office are not going. And not only that, the companies that they work for are enabling them to stay where they are. Now that has a major impact on greenhouse emissions, right? But it also has a rebalancing effect of the economy. So in effect, businesses will move out of cities. So instead of cities being this concentration of, oddly enough, a lot of bad, unsustainable crap, what's happening in the UK from the ground up is that people are not going into those cities. So the sandwich bar guy, his business is going to shut down. So what he's going to have to consider is moving out of London. But oddly enough, moving out of London is probably a good thing because the house prices are really high. So he'll do well if he moves out of London, or the woman that runs the shoe repair shop that's near all the offices. It'll have to be more local. So it's going to force a readjustment through society, certainly in the UK, hopefully across the globe. And if we can have that change of demographic across, across the landscape, so that we rebalance things and London isn't the heaving mess that it is now, then what will be needed is far more coordination technology for those communities. And it has to be communication and coordination technology that is not owned by any one entity. And that's why OnChain, for me. I actually spoke to a guy today. He's the CEO of, I think it's called Blocktangle. They're based out of Germany. He's Chinese, Dr. Chu, I think it is. And they claim to have scalable this, that, and the other. Everyone claims it. I haven't seen anyone defend that proposition apart from us. So he claims huge scale, and he claims all these areas where it could be used. But the single thing that he doesn't, one of the things he doesn't have that's a limiting factor is the ownership of his blockchain. By having a public blockchain and by seeding a public blockchain from a cooperative, just as we're doing, the issues of centralized ownership disappear.
Oh, it's so easy. It's so easy to get high scale if you
trust one.
Yeah,
if you trust one, I can give you hundreds of thousands of transactions a second.
Oh yeah, that's well documented. We all know that.
We know that one.
Yeah.
The real key here is collective ownership, because
that's right.
Every community, if you imagined a future, where you do move people out of cities into villages and smaller towns, and you have a more holistic approach to life in those towns, and so that commuting is not the dominant factor it is today, then people will take more care of where they live, right? And if people take more care of where they live, they will be making decisions locally that have some impact globally. But to then coordinate that, you need a technology that's trusted and all the rest of it, not owned by any corporate body, because the danger is the corporate body will shut you down because they don't want the decentralization.
You're absolutely right. And this model works across many different sectors. I think I've mentioned on this call, but it bears mentioning again. One of the things that I thought about over a decade ago is how medicine and society would be transformed if we simply brought back the house call.
Yeah.
So this was all triggered in my mind because my son, who was 4 at the time, got his thumb smashed in a door. Happens to every kid eventually, right? And my partner at the time was just, she was nervous. She wasn't a native English speaker, so she decided to take him to the emergency room. After the insurance paid, we still had a $1,500 bill.
Yeah, I mean, that's the situation,
I was looking at that, and it was just like, if I didn't laugh, I would have just been furious, right?
Well, you have to laugh to avoid crying sometimes. So.
It was just so ridiculous. But anyway, I realized that the situation is they need to justify all of the expensive equipment and everything else, right? And so they have to charge these ridiculous rates for procedures that 30 years ago the doctor would have handed my son a lollipop and said, "Yep, it hurts. See you in a bit." I mean, that would have been the solution or the cure. But imagine now if the doctor has to do house calls. There's no room in the vehicle that the doctor is going to practically drive for a lot of expensive equipment. That's all going to be cut down, right? So immediately a whole bunch of non-essential procedures are cut just because of the constraints of the house call format, right? Also, now you don't have millions of people driving to the hospital. You have one doctor driving to each home. So that also fits in with environment. And then, if the doctor has to serve neighborhoods that are unsafe or or have other unsavory components to them, you can bet that the doctor will speak with a very loud voice, advocating that those neighborhoods receive appropriate attention from the other cultural institutions. So that will also, and the doctor will bring back vital information about those neighborhoods for epidemiological results, etc. So the point is that shifting from centralized to decentralized also has all these other knock-on effects. And you're right, it then requires a coordination technology to facilitate all of that.
Mm. Medicine's an interesting case, I think, in terms of, can decentralization work, and can this notion of collective ownership rather than centralized ownership work? And the UK is well known for its NHS, which we protect fiercely, despite the current government probably wanting to privatize it all. But if you can have a situation where medicine is freely available at the point of need, and it is paid out of general taxation, so we all own it, and that you have coordination technology that is not biased towards any one pharma company or any large state entity, but collectively owned by these towns, right? Then you can effectively manage a large health network, just like the NHS. And just as you said, I mean, unfortunately, one of the cuts that our government did was to get rid of the house visit. And that's been one of the biggest mistakes. There's been many, but that's one of the biggest ones throughout the lifetime of the NHS. And the NHS, really, when you think about it, when you think about not just medicine, because the NHS is about medicine, you have a cut, you need it attended to. It doesn't deal with social and elderly care, but it needs to. And one of the challenges to the NHS has been more and more old people end up dying in hospital. They don't die in their own bed, even. So the hospital's used as an extension to social care for the elderly. And so it's actually misused. And it turns out that when the NHS was created at the end of the war, the thought process was, if we have an NHS, suddenly everyone will get much more healthy, and actually, the demand will top out. But of course, what happened is, they did get more healthy. And unfortunately, they lived longer. And there's no getting away from the fact that at some point you'll die, right? So it's very success. And the lack of focus on care for the elderly has been the Achilles heel to the NHS. But if you move everything to communities, to more localized stuff, Sweden do a great job, and Denmark do a great job of positioning care homes next to primary schools. It's a brilliant idea. The kids go in and the old people in the home read to them. So it really builds a sense of community and lineage in those communities and makes them stronger. But the missing link for all of this is to act collectively. And for that, we need OnChain.
Yeah, that's where the hour in OnChain comes in. That's what it's about. Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, my mom, she started a violin school when I was a baby. And I grew up, in this violin school. Well, I mean, I went to regular school too, but after that I went to her school. And we would do concerts in the nursing home all the time. Like, a group of us would go and we'd perform. And they actually had a theater in this nursing home, so it was a very nice place. And we would go and we would perform there. And I did it probably, 20 or 30 times over the course of my childhood. But I remember it being a very wonderful experience, because they were so happy to see us. and they were such an easy audience to please. And, you know, I really enjoyed that because it seemed like they really appreciated that we were there, you know.
That's nice.
Yes, it was nice, yeah. I hope they still do that. I should ask her if they, I'm sure they still do that.
So I have a question about a more practical, perhaps, question, kind of thinking out loud about about how Dappy and Our Cat could potentially connect. In the context of perhaps a music streaming social network. So like if I had a music streaming social network that I wanted to make sure that artists who are independent, they own their own compositions and recordings, and they want to upload that data via Our Cat, I guess. Like Our Cat would be the way for them to catalog the information about what it is that they own with their creations, and then be able to kind of create their own page, a la more like MySpace than Facebook, where they have their their own kind of domain within the network. Is this something that Our Cat and Dappy together could take care of?
It could potentially. I mean, you and I have had many chats about our song Revolution, as we like to call it these days. But you and I, Daryl, but to do it, I think you got to come. If you were going to be successful in gaining market share, because at the end of the day, it's about getting musicians on the platform. So to get musicians on the platform, even if we've got a fairly boring codec, right, but not a crap codec, it's got to be good enough. To get musicians on the platform, from the consumer's perspective, you need a single place to go to play your music. So you need that app on your phone, right? So I can confirm completely that it's entirely possible, for instance, to take Our Cat in its embodiment within our song, within the software that is there, and do a pass through to a Spotify account. Right, so I could listen to all my Spotify stuff and anything on OnChain. Right, so that's a key. It's a key enabler, because only then will you get enough momentum to have the social network take off.
So you're saying that the DApp would be one stop shop. You would have you'd be able to play. You'd be able to stream. Through the Revolution system, but you would also connect to some kind of like a Spotify player.
Yeah, no, you're not a player. You connect through to it would authenticate you against Spotify, Daryl. This new player would authenticate, even though it's an OnChain, an our song one, would authenticate you through Spotify and enable you to see all your playlists and all the music that you have on Spotify today.
Okay.
But in a new app, your app, the OnChain app, right?
But
so that means that you don't have to switch players.
I see.
Right? So then you could imagine implementing a search feature above it that searched for music on OnChain and Spotify. Right? So the reason why that's also important is, from the musician's perspective, a musician's not going to give up on Spotify, all the while it has this huge market share. So the way to take Spotify out the picture is very gradually, a bit like when you cook a lobster. One of the ways you can cook a lobster is you put it in a pot of cold water, and the heat rises and it kind of goes to sleep and then gets cooked. It dies, obviously, alas. But if you like lobster, maybe not. But the point being is that it's very gradual. So musicians, if they knew there was a platform that could incorporate all of the Spotify stuff that they've got around now today, right, they could leave that there and their user base could still listen to that, but now listen to the new tracks they've decided to put onto our song, the Revolution platform, because they get a better rate of return.
And in particular, the search can organize things so that an artist can say, well, I really prefer like if I have a version on OnChain and a version on Spotify, please list the version on OnChain first because my rate of return on OnChain is much higher.
Yes, indeed. And then from a social media perspective, if you and I were chatting about a song and we said, oh, there's that song, maybe we're on a Zoom call, and we said, we should send a message to Nora and to Greg about this song. It's really cool. They should hear this. And it could be a Spotify one, or it could be one on OnChain. Doesn't matter. Either way, we have a resource that names the song wherever they are. And we can send that on our social media platform. And if Greg and Nora have the same app, they could just click on that, ping, and then they could hear it too.
And what's, again, talking about boiling the lobster, if it turns out that Spotify has restrictions on how players may represent their data. So, for example, you're not allowed to share links in a chat. Whatever those restrictions might be, but that's one that's really important. Then Spotify becomes less useful and less interesting to users because what users want to do with music, in addition to listening to it, is to share it.
Indeed.
Right. So all of the social features and the music services have been very slow in implementing the real social services that people want, right? People want to be able to share playlists. They want to be able to share songs. They want to be able to send a song as a gift, not send a gift certificate, send a specific song because it's specifically appropriate to that relationship at that time. All of those things, the music services have been very slow to implement because it disenfranchises them from their users.
It's on purpose. It interferes with the business model that they've grown up with, so they can't deviate from the idea that they must be the curators.
Right, and so this is where again OnChain comes into focus, right? So people will begin to prefer it because they can do the things that they wanted to do all along.
Exactly.
That's
and I don't know if you remember, but back in those early days, Nora, I know you were more involved in it than Daryl was with me, at least. And I came up with this idea. We should do this silent disco app. I remember talking about it to you and to Ned.
Oh, yeah. Well, now with COVID, that would be even more important.
Well, you know what? We should have done it then. Because in May of this year, Spotify just launched it. They've got what's called a sync option for multiple users to listen simultaneously, as if you were in a silent disco.
I'm so sorry. Would you like me to send flowers?
So, yeah, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. I still think we've got the design for it, and now that Spotify have that, then we know that we can do it. We can do it by using some of Spotify's APRs, and there's a separate app called MixLR, which is a Spotify.
Oh, I remember that. You showing me that, yeah.
Right, so that's the one that does the silent disco now.
Sit. Oh, sorry. I thought I was muted.
Oh, that's okay.
I was telling Piper to sit.
We really don't have very much time left, about a minute. Maybe we could continue this discussion next week. Is this a possible place to leave it off?
Yes.
What can I ask for a subject to be lodged, which is I would really like to have a discussion about music and its role in climate coordination and climate change?
Well, since you asked, I take requests written neatly on the back of $100 bills. And so if you just send one, I would be very happy. No, I'm just kidding. Well,
I
of
will
course.
go to my Monopoly board and I shall take
That's
out one
great.
of those notes.
No, but look, that is that's a great idea to discuss. So I'm going to write that down and we can try to come up with some points on that next week. And I think Daryl might have a guest for us lined up next week as well. So we'll see about that. And Steve, I'll write down your suggestion. And thank you all for joining us this week. Please subscribe to OnChain on YouTube. You can join OnChain as a member at rchain.coop. And if you have any suggestions of topics or if you would like to be a guest, please email us at climate@rchain.coop. Thank you all so much for a wonderful discussion.
Thank
Great.
you. Ciao, ciao.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, you too, Steve. Bye.